So so initially we had these 4 issues, right? Again, they're not that different than CCI's issues 8 years ago. Secure jobs, fair trade, health care for all, retirement security, bargaining and organizing rights. And what we saw was that we really can't get there on those issues, at least on a federal level. 2008 was a high watermark. We shouldn't fool ourselves. In modern times, we can't do any better than we did in 2008 in that election on that agenda and your agenda, including environmental cleanup, other issues that we're also aligned with. We can't do any better than that. And so why in 2009 and 10, at the federal level, did we get virtually nothing done? Well, because from the beginning, as soon as that election was over, that 1%, it's not even 1%, immediately started in. And people, fueled in part by racism in parts of this country, including here, where they don't have much to fear, frankly, formed the Tea Party, and that was a big underpinning of it. We have an African-American president, right? And they never for a minute sort of gave in to what people voted for. More importantly than the Tea Party, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce dug in and said, we're in trouble here. What are we going to do? And so, for us at least, we started to realize, probably a little late, that these democracy issues had to be linked to our economic issues. They had to be linked when we organize, whether it's T-Mobile in Wichita or GE in Burlington or Public Workers or anywhere else. When we bargain, we have a vicious negotiation going on with CenturyLink. Covers a lot of our members here in Iowa, but it's 14 states. We're bargaining over the same issues. Can we hold on to our jobs? They want to contract them out. Can we hold on to our health care? They want to drastically ratchet up the cost of health care so people don't even want the health care because they can't afford it. Retirement security. Every private sector employer in this country is trying to eliminate pensions. 80% have done it. 80% have eliminated pensions in this country. Most importantly, bargaining and organizing rights, because if we don't have that at work, we don't even have a voice. And so we saw, after 2010, this again on the federal level, that 111th Congress adjourns. And meanwhile, in the fall of 2010, we had the election with the backlash. But the 2 years, supermajorities in both houses and the president. And so we learned there that these democracy issues, which we defined as what you already said here, the $7 billion, the big money in politics, the fact that 70% in the U.S. Senate, 70% of any candidate's money is coming from corporate America or the 1%. 70. So union sisters and brothers here, the fundraising we do and all that, if that's the main thing we're doing, that's got a big F on it for the school teachers here. Failure. Can't possibly work, at least at the federal level. Because 70% or more of the money is coming from the other side. They're in both parties. They totally control now the Republican Party, but that's also where the Democratic candidates go to raise their money. The ones who are a little bit better. So big money in politics. Voter registration. More than 30 states, as you all know, and there's examples of this here in Iowa, pushing voter suppression. But at the meantime, we learned that only 70% of American citizens are registered to vote in the first place. That's the lowest of any democracy in the world. Well, guess who the 30% are who are missing? They're working people. And retired working people. They're not people from the 1%. It's our people. So that's another thing, right? We have the money in politics. We have these voter registration rules in most states. Now, there are states, North Dakota, surprisingly, is one of them. Oregon is another. There are examples where that's not the case. Much higher levels of voter participation, voter registration, early voting, etc. So anyway, we realized voting rights is a big problem here. And then we realized that the Senate rules, so very concretely, that 111th Congress, Speaker Pelosi, who we call best speaker ever, not because we happen to like her, but because she actually was the best speaker ever. Not the first woman speaker, she was also that, but she was the best speaker ever. Passed 400 pieces of legislation that never got discussed for a second in the U.S. Senate. And so we learned about this really boring subject that I now talk about all over the place, called Senate rules. and they're getting worse and worse. And Senate rules are that the Senate operates like the Senate of ancient Rome, Cicero's Senate. In the Senate of ancient Rome, they would bring up a topic during the day, and if they didn't finish that night, it was dead, and they had to start all over again. If one senator objected, that person could talk, and that would tie it up on that issue. So they literally had unanimous consent. Now, we don't think we have unanimous consent. Well, actually, we do, because they don't filibuster anymore. So Harry Reid, the current majority leader, I met with him last fall when he told me, many times, we have to change the rules. You guys were right with this big coalition that NPA is in called Fix the Senate Now, part of this democracy initiative on these key democracy issues. And that democracy initiative is not predominantly labor. It's Greens, it's labor, it's students, it's all kinds of groups like NPA, US Action, Gamaliel, which is a faith-based network, all kinds of groups. And actually, it's the groups are mostly listed in the booklet, that page that I held up before. And Harry Reid said, you guys were right, we should have changed the rules. I didn't do it. We're going to do it in 2013. So when a new Senate comes in, that's called a new Congress, a new Senate, a new House. After an election, they're called a new Congress. They're there for 2 years until the next election. And that's the time, most appropriately, that you change the rules. Just like at a CWA national meeting, we have the rules at the beginning. Yeah, you can change them later, but that's the most appropriate time. Well, so once again, they didn't do it. He made a handshake with McConnell, and you now see the Senate operate the worst it's ever operated. And so this third issue, which, again, I want to move on because I can dwell on this way too long. This third issue, the Senate rules, is so bad now that the president can't get his nominees confirmed. Now, normally no one's going to come to a meeting like this and talk about the confirmation of the president's executive branch nominees. I mean, how boring is that, right? But it's not just boring, because it means that the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Cordray, after going through all that stuff with Dodd-Frank, there's never been a confirmed director. If they have their way, the Republican minority, there isn't going to be. It's got nothing to do with Richard Cordray. For working class people, the National Labor Relations Board is now down to 3 members. Can't get anybody confirmed. There's supposed to be 5. 2 of them from the opposition party, 3 from the president's party. There's only 1 that's confirmed, Mark Pierce, the chairman. His term ends on August 27th. If there's not at least 3, and they better be the 3 from the president's party confirmed, because the other 2 are corporate lawyers who are against the National Labor Relations Act. They were Mitch McConnell's contribution to this. But if those 3 are not confirmed before the Senate recesses, the NLRB is effectively shut down. It's virtually shut down now. Josh's case, the only place that case has to go is the National Labor Relations Board. It already takes them years to get to a case like that, at least a year or 2 years. The key guy who was fired at the GE plant in Burlington, that took 2 years. I could go on and on about the firings and what goes on. Most of them are not union organizers. Most of them are regular working people who talk to somebody else at work about conditions at work. Like, what do you think of the health care here? What do you think of the pay here? Or we publicized a case recently of a rocket scientist at the Jet Propulsion Lab at Caltech, who, when he learned that there were other rocket scientists who were under surveillance, he sent an email to a bunch of his colleagues about the surveillance. And he got disciplined at the highest level. He didn't get fired. Before firing, this is after a lifetime as a rocket scientist. So if a rocket scientist can go through this, now he got that discipline removed eventually. It took 5 years through the National Labor Relations Board. So all kinds of, the only place where we can go, private sector workers, for anything from defending your bargaining rights, if you've been fortunate enough to win bargaining rights, which is harder and harder to do, to just 2 workers having a conversation and getting fired, that's the National Labor Relations Board and their regions. But on these bigger issues, we got to throw in together. We each have our examples of that. We have to throw in together. And we can absolutely build a movement across this country of 50 million for economic justice and democracy. But to do that, we have to work at it. It doesn't fall from the sky like the rain you've had here. We got to work at it. We have to consciously build that democracy movement.
That's right.
And so what we want to do together is build organizations like CCI. We will help build it together. But then also build this broader movement that will not fall out of the sky, that's ready to fight on a very narrow issue next week, for example. We're well mobilized across this country to get an NLRB that'll fight for Josh's job and for other workers who have been abused. And we can understand the linkage of these issues now. And as we grow, more of us, and a deeper understanding of that, they're not going to be able to stop us. And as you've said so many times here today, we get off of defense onto offense. We get to fight for the American dream that we want, that our children think they have. The kind of Iowa, the kind of nation that's well within our grasp, if we can unite, if we can build this movement broader and deeper. So I couldn't be prouder to have been here today. Hopefully we have a few minutes for some conversation from the group. And I'll just close by asking you this. What do we do when we're under attack?
Stand up, fight back!
What do we do when we're under attack?
Stand up.
What do we do when we're under attack? We stand up, we fight back. We stand up, we fight back. We stand up, we fight back. We stand up,